Okay, we're going to learn the Maimer on this pamphlet on page 68, which is a Maimer in Parshas Re'eh. But the Divrei HaMaschil of the Maimer is Lidodi, which is connected with Elul. If you look on note 910, he brings the Rebbe, the notes from the Rebbe, which is printed in the back of Likutei Torah. So the Rebbe writes, Tzorach iyun obir ratam, so it requires examination and clarification, ala shelebo drushim leParshas Shoftim vayelech. Af shekama mehem nimtzoyim bebichlach drushidach, even though there are books of drushim, of the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe, which have been said for Parshas Shoftim and Parshas Vayelech. So Tzorach needs examination and clarification why the Tzemach Tzedek didn't put in Likutei Torah Maimarim for these parshas. And in another place, it doesn't say it here, but it says that the Kavana, the Derech Efsher, is that the Tzemach Tzedek wanted us to learn Parshas Shoftim, which is usually coincides with Elul, with Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos Mevarchim, Chodesh Elul. And so he wanted us to learn the Maimarim of Chodesh Elul, which is the Maimer of, there's two Maimarim of Lidodi. The first one, and which is the famous Maimer, which is the mashal that the Alter Rebbe gives of a Melech Basada, the king in the field. That whole concept comes from the Maimer of Lidodi, the first Maimer on Lidodi. Then you have a second on Lidodi, which Mitzvah Shem we're going to be learning today. And so these were the Maimarim that we were supposed to learn in this is Davar Be'ite. This is the time for that. Okay. Ani Lidodi v'Dodi li harei b'Shishanim. So Ani Lidodi, this is a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. So Shlomo HaMelech says, referring to the relationship between the Yidden and the Eibishter, says, Ani Lidodi, I am to my beloved, to the Eibishter, this is, as we know, the Aveda, that we need to come close to Hashem through our Aveda, through our service to Hashem. And then, V'Dodi li, the Eibishter then comes close to me. Hareya b'Shishanim. Hareya b'Shishanim means that he pastures his sheep b'Shishanim, in the garden, in the rose garden. And the Alter Rebbe will explain that really the key of this whole pasuk is Hareya b'Shishanim. The Hareya b'Shishanim is really what facilitates the Ani Lidodi, and that brings about later the Dodi li. What's the Hareya b'Shishanim? That's the Nesinas Koyach that were given during the month of Elul, which is the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the 13 Midas of compassion, and that is symbolized by the Shoshana, by the rose, which has 13 petals, as it says in the Zohar. So Hareya b'Shishanim is what facilitates then afterwards the Aveda of Ani Lidodi, because of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, as Alter Rebbe will explain. And that's the whole mashal that Alter Rebbe gives in the first Maimer of Ani Lidodi. Al Melech Basada, the king is in the field, is only to illustrate through that mashal what does it mean that during the month of Elul there's a gilui, there's a revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. It's like a king Basada in the field. So that's the Hareya b'Shishanim. That's what it's referring to. Okay. So Hine, the Alter Rebbe teaches the pasuk, Shoshana yesh batlei saralin, that a Shoshana, a rose, has 13 leaves, petals. Keneged Yud Gimel Mechilin Derachami. Now, I don't know, if you count the petals of a rose, there's more than 13. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, like the whole thing with the pomegranate, how many seeds it has. It's already it's brought down and has 613 seeds. It could be more or less. But Akopanim, the symbol of the Shoshana, that's the way it's described in the Zohar, and the petals of the Shoshana refer to the Yud Gimel Mechilin Derachmi. Shebepasuk mi kel kamecha, u'shebepasuk kel rachum. There are two illustrations of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. One is in the Torah, and the other one is in Navi. If you pay attention when you do Tashlich, see, if you see Tashlich, we read from the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim from Micha, which is from Navi. But then, if you look in the Machzer, you can see how they correspond together. Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, Erech Hapayim, Erech Chesed V'emes, those 13 midas, the way it's described in the Torah, the way Moshe Rabbeinu said it, and how they coincide to the words of Micha. But it's also Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. Now here the Alter Rebbe in the end of the Maimer will explain the difference between the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the way it was expressed and articulated by Moshe Rabbeinu, and the way they were articulated by Micha. It's two. It refers to Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, but it refers to two different levels of divine compassion, which we'll see later. But over here, the Alter Rebbe, in translating the pasuk Harei b'Shishanim, so he explains this idea. What is a Shoshana? Based on what it says in the Zohar, that it has 13 petals, so it refers to the 13 Midas Harachamim, both the 13 Midas Harachamim, the way it is in the Torah, and the way it's described in Navi, in the pasuk Mikel Kamecha. The Alter Rebbe starts with Mikel Kamecha, which l'chura you would think the source of Yud Gimel Harachamim is from the Torah, Kel Racham V'chanan. But it could be that because the Alter Rebbe will explain at the end of the Maimer that the Chidush of the month of Elul is more specifically Mikel Kamecha and not the Yud Gimel Midas of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Mikel Kamecha is the Chidush. That's the way the Yud Gimel Midas are described by Micha, and that's more specifically connected with the with Elul time, as we'll see later on. Shemisham Mukara Tshuva Lies Neisa, and that from there, from the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, it's from there, from that compassion that the Eibishter receives our tshuva. Veheim means these Yud Gimel Midas, this Shoshanim, this is the Yud Gimel Midas, Hamizgalim B'Rish Chodesh Elul. They are revealed B'Rish Chodesh Elul and throughout the month of Elul. She'ozu B'chinas Eis Ratzin. That's a time of Eis Ratzin. Now, this concept that Elul, the month of Elul, is an Eis Ratzin, is an auspicious time, is not something that Chassidus was mechadish, meaning that's in halacha you have. That's why a lot of things we do during the month of Elul, there's beginning even from before Elul, even beginning from Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul. It's known that Erev Rosh Chodesh is what's known as Yom Kippur Katan, the Small Yom Kippur, which means that people fast, just like Yom Kippur. People also they say in Mincha, like we do Erev Yom Kippur, we say the Al Chet, the Al Chet on the Mincha, is Mincha before Rosh Chodesh. That's Yom Kippur Katan. So that's a known thing. That's every Erev Rosh Chodesh. So already in Shulchan Aruch it's brought down how the people have accustomed to observe the Yom Kippur Katan of Chodesh Elul. For that reason, because Elul is an Eis Ratzin, Elul is an auspicious time, and then other things, we blow shofar, and some people say slichus the whole month. So the things that we do specifically illustrating the fact I'm saying lahalacha. This is not a chiddush of Chassidus. Chassidus explains this on a much in a deep way to understand what's going on, what is the dynamic, what's happening during the month of Elul that makes it so special. And the Alter Rebbe actually brings right here. He explains why is Chodesh Elul so special. In other words, what happened Chodesh Elul where we see the fact that it's an Eis Ratzon. So the Alter Rebbe says, "Kimirish Chodesh Elul adachar Yom Kippurim hey mem yem sha'al Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom lamarim lekabel luchos ha'achronos." So this is the 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to receive the second luchos. And like it says in the Gemara, Ma Yamim Arishonim Beratzin, Afelu Beratzin. The Yom Arishonim means when Moshe Rabbeinu went up after Shavuos. Moshe Rabbeinu was when there was the Matan Torah. So there's 40 days. Then you have the third 40 days, which begins from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur. Which those were the 40 days which we were forgiven, which culminated on Yom Kippur when Hashem v'salachti k'dvarecha, the Eibishter forgave us. And that's what we have, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And then you have the middle 40 days, which begins Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and ends on Rosh Chodesh Elul. Those are the middle 40 days, which were not Beratzin. So the Eis Ratzin, the auspicious time, which is connected with Chodesh Elul, begins when Moshe Rabbeinu went up a second time to receive the Luchos Shneis. So this Haraya b'Shishanim, which we said describes the Yud Gimel B'Disrachim, this pasture of Shishanim, meaning the Gilui of Yud Gimel B'Disrachim, is connected with the first part of the pasuk of Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, which is the Rashi Tevis of Elul. And the truth is, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li is not all. Doesn't encompass Elul. Ani L'Doidi is Elul. The Doidi Li is actually begins with Shoshana, but really Yom Kippur, and then it continues Sukkos, that's when you have a Gilui of Elikus. But it's all it all begins from the Ani L'Doidi, from the beginning of Elul.
So Haraya b'Shanim represents the fact that the Yigam Mizrachim are revealed in this time of Anadei, which is.
So Haraya, the literal translation of Haraya b'Shishanim is that the Eibishter takes his sheep, which is the Yidden, into pasture, right? But what is the Kavanas Advarim is the Chassidus is explaining Haraya b'Shishanim. What is the idea of taking the sheep, the Yidden, into pasture? The pasture in the Shishanim is the Yud Gimel Midas, and that is in a Sinas Koyach. That's what the Gilui of Yud Gimel Midas, which happens during the month of Elul. Tzarich lahavin. So after the Alter Rebbe explains that was all an explanation of the pasuk Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li Haraya b'Shishanim.
Does the Rebbe speak about Haraya b'Shishanim in his Memorim?
Yes. Of course, it's a custom. You also have the Indian of Shishanim. Alter Rebbe is going to bring this Maimer, another pshat of the Indian of Altikra that says Shishanim ela Shoshana. Shoshana halachas, the Indian of Limud Torah. The connection between Haraya b'Shishanim, the way we're explaining here, the idea of Yud Gimel Yisrachim to the Indian of Limud Torah dafka. But that's we got ahead of ourselves. Akopanim v'tzarich lohavin. So the Alter Rebbe asks, "Ma'u inyan Yud Gimel Yisrachim b'Chodesh Elul?" Nice concept. What does it mean practically? What does it mean that in Chodesh Elul there's a gilui of Yud Gimel Yisrachim? And the Alter Rebbe he emphasizes, especially about Aseres Yemei Tshuva. So we know Aseres Yemei Tshuva. Then you see that the Indian of Yud Gimel Yisrachim is that we're forgiven. Hastis, that's the whole idea of Yom Kippur. And Aseret Tshuva in general, but especially Yom Kippur, is the time of tshuva, and when we do tshuva, we're forgiven. So that's clear. You see the indication, the practical application of Yud Gim Midas Rachamim, that there's forgiveness. So Yitochen Sheim Meislich O Mechila. Ulekach Emer B'Aseret Tshuva Vayaver Avaya. So there's specifically in Aseret Tshuva, they would say Sliches. Vayaver Avaya means which is the idea of Yud Gimel Midas. But what is the idea that on Elul time you have this Gilui? We say on Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, beginning of Rosh Chodesh Elul, you have the Gilui of Yud Gimel Midas Rachim. What is Where do you see it? Where is this present? The idea that on Elul you have the Gilui of Yud Gimel Midas Rachim. And what's the practical application of that? Mele on the practical of application Legabe Yisrael Simei Tshuva is it Simei Slicha or Mechila? Where is that Legabe? Where do you see that Legabe Elul? So in order to understand that, the Alter Rebbe goes and to explain the concept, the main concept of the Maimer is the concept of tshuva. What is tshuva? So this is explained in many places. The world thinks tshuva is connected with averis. If you do something, you do an avera, so you need to do tshuva, which is true. It's not. Chassidus doesn't take that away, but the depth of tshuva, what tshuva really means, is much deeper than fixing an avera. Because if it was only fixing an avera, then it would only apply to Rishayim, people that someone that went astray. But the depth of the meaning of tshuva is actually to reconnect the neshama, which is with its source, and that's not specifically with Rishayim. The fact that the neshama came down into this world, it's a yerida, even for a tzaddik. So the idea of tshuva is, that's why it says, Yafer sha'achas b'tshuva ma'asim tovim ba'olam hazeh. The tshuva ma'asim tovim, which is unique to olam hazeh, that's more than kol chai olam haba, and that's not unique to someone who does an avera. That's every neshama, and that's what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain here. Tehine hatshuva eina al avenis dafke. Tshuva is not specifically on averis. Sharei tzarech liyis kol yamav b'tshuva. So if it was only an averis, then it wouldn't be. The tshuva, you fix it, and that's it. The idea of kol yamav b'tshuva means that the tshuva is an aveda. There's an aveda tshuva, and the aveda of tshuva, that's something which is continuous. Kol yamav. Ela b'chinas tshuva sheshav midarki harishin. Tshuva means to return from where you were. U'kumesha imrim, like it says, v'hachazirenu b'shuva shleima lefanecha. That the Eibusha should return us b'shuva shleima lefanecha, before you. If you say it Shmoneh. So in order to understand this concept of tshuva, so the Alter Rebbe first will introduce the idea of Sovev and Mamali, which we have many Maimarim that talk about it. And then the Alter Rebbe will introduce the idea, the difference between Sovev and Mamali as it relates to Torah and mitzvahs. Torah being Mamali and mitzvahs being Sovev. And then the Alter Rebbe will go back. That's the system, the way it was intended in one's avodah, if everything went according to the plan. But being that there was inyan of a pgam, that in other words, someone who didn't follow that in accordance the way it was supposed to be. So then requires the inyan of tshuva to rectify that, to repair that. And that's the inyan of tshuva. So then the Alter Rebbe will get back to the inyan of tshuva. Okay. So bir inyan, to explain the inyan of tshuva, so the Alter Rebbe starts off with a Gemara. The Gemara, there's an argument in the Gemara regarding what's more important, mitzvahs or Torah. So yesh beis deis, there are two opinions. Echad oimer, one opinion says Talmud Gadol, that what is greater, the learning Torah is greater. In other words, between Torah and mitzvahs. Both opinions are based, if you look at the first parsha of Shema. In the second parsha of Shema, so in the first parsha of Shema, it says V'shanantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, talks about limud Torah, and then it says Ukshartam le'yisayedecha, which is the inyan of mitzvahs, the inyan of tefillah. And the second parsha, first it says the inyan of mitzvahs, and then it says the inyan of Torah. So which one is it? That brought up the question: which one is more important? Is Torah more important than mitzvahs, or mitzvahs more important than Torah? So that from there stand both opinions. One opinion says a Talmud Gadol, ve'echad oimer Maisa Gadol, that the mitzvahs is greater. V'nimnu v'gamru. So then they had the discussion, and they concluded that what Talmud Gadol, that why is Talmud Gadol, why is learning greater? Shemei v'lidei Maisa. So it's almost, this is like a third opinion. The opinion that says Talmud Gadol is because Torah itself is greater. The opinion that says that Maisa Gadol, so that's because Maisa itself, the Maisa Mitzvah is greater. The Alter Rebbe will explain why each one, what's the svara, what's the logic for each one, why one is greater than the other. And then V'nimnu v'gamru, that they concluded that Talmud Gadol, but Shemei v'lidei Maisa. It's a third opinion that Talmud is greater, not because of what we said before. Before we said Talmud Gadol is mitzad, the inyan of Talmud. But over here we're saying it's almost like a third opinion that Talmud Gadol, but Shemei v'lidei Maisa. It's almost like it takes both opinions and combines them together. So let's to understand what's going on between what exactly is the machlokes, and what is the conclusion. So the Alter Rebbe opens up, gives us another introduction, which that is the inyan of Sev Memale, which that is really the idea, the difference between Talmud and Maisa. So when we understand Sev Memale, then we understand what the argument is, and then V'nimnu v'gamru. Okay, so lahov v'nimnu machlokes over Maika Miflagi, to understand their argument between the Maika Miflagi, what exactly is the basis of their argument? As yesh lahagdim lahavin tchila mashakasu. So let's begin with explaining the idea of Sev Memale. How do we introduce Sev Memale? So we introduce it with two psukim. One pasuk refers to Seviv, and the other pasuk refers to Memale. And both psukim, before we know that they refer to Seviv and Memale, it seems that those both psukim are actually contradicting each other. One pasuk is in Yirmiyah. It says, "Yesh lahagdim lahavin tchila mashakasuv as a shamayim v'saretz ani moli." So the Eibishter fills the shamayim and the aretz, the heavens and the earth. We use the word ani. V'halei ksiv, and then it says in another pasuk, "Maloi kol aretz kvedei." So the aretz is filled with kvedei. What's kvedei? Kvedei refers to a ray, a shine. So one pasuk refers to the ani, the other one pasuk refers to the kvedei. And what else do we see? That's one difference we see between the two psukim. Another difference we see is the pasuk that refers to the ani. So there it says shamayim and aretz. The pasuk that refers to kvedei, there it just says aretz. So we need to understand what the difference between both psukim. So Alter Rebbe, that's the two diukim that Alter Rebbe makes. Number one, v'lo niska shamayim. V'lo kol aretz kvedi, there it doesn't mention shamayim. V'gam shesham ne'amar ani molei. V'kan ksiv kvedi. Sham means in the pasuk as a shamayim. So there it says ani, and in the pasuk in Yeshaya it says kvedi. So like we said, each one is referring to a different level of alikus. One is referring to Sefer Klam and the other one is referring to Malek Klam. Achini Yedua Diyesh Malek Klam and Sefer Klam. Now what's the difference between a Malek and Sefer? Upirush Malek Klam and who? Bechinas Ha'ares Alikus Hanimshach Benivroim Lahachyesa Ma'asarem Amones. So this is that level of a chayis which is nimshach, which is drawn into the nivra, into the creation. That's where the chayis that allows it to exist. That's what gives it its specific identity. Like it says, Yihi'er b'dvar Hashem shehu mislabesh b'pnimiyusam v'terich tericham mamish. So pnimiyusa means that's what gives it its uniqueness, its specific qualities of every single nivra, of every single creation. That comes from the memale, from the dibur of Hashem. Shenimshach bekirbam liyos chayis lehem. And so, being that it's nimshach and it gives chayis to each one of the nivraim, specifically, so every nivra is different. And Alter Rebbe brings a mashal. So we see in the world there's chayis, life, but life is divided into four general categories: doimim, the inanimate, semeach, the vegetation, chai, the animals, and medaber, which is people. So what determines the difference between each one of those categories has to do with the amount of chayis that it receives. So all of that, it pertains to the idea of mamalik kolamin. That's the chayis that each nivra receives, that each creation receives from Hashem. So analyzing the distinction between each one of these four categories, so it's also created. They're all created from the dibur of Hashem. In other words, the overarching chayis is memale, which is represented by Hashem's dibur. The dibur means that the Eibishter brought it into existence through dibur, which dibur itself is a mashal, just like dibur of a person, lahavda. The whole idea of dibur is to be able to connect with someone outside of you. So too, the whole idea, the nimshal, is that the Eibishter that created that there should be a mitzias, there should be an existence that it was created that feels outside of Hashem. In other words, it feels its own existence. But within that you have the distinction between daimim, tzemeach, chai, medaber. And all of this is within the realm of mamalik kolamin. Shadei magam shnesava gam kim asarim amoris. Venim shechboi gam kin chayis likus. Meisi ha-maimer. From the maimer, they're also a maimer. Kamashnim shechayis likus b'tzemeach v'chay. So just like the chayis was administered, the life was administered through one maimer, one utterance of Hashem, so too is administered in a different utterance of Hashem. So what makes the distinction? Mikol makim, the difference is that in one utterance, the chayus say mitzum zer zer. In doimim, the chayis is there very, very contracted. Ze'er, a very little bit. V'hatzemeach, and by tzemeach, so even though, yes, it also came through a maimer, but there the chayis was a more chayis. Yesh bechayis yeser. And that's why you see tzemeach. And this is also evident when you're observing the different aspects of the world. Each one is expressing the chayis. You can see the chayis in different ways. In a daimim, you see the chayis only by the mere fact of its existence. And that's what daimim means. It's silent. It doesn't express the chayis. It's hidden. Masha'enkin tzemeach. So here, what do you see with tzemeach? You see the chayis, Likutei. You see the chayis of the Eibishter in the fact that it grows. So you see some type of movement. So the chayis is being expressed in the movement of that particular nivra. Mm-hmm. And then you have the idea of chay, which chay is even more than tzemeach. The Rebbe doesn't articulate in each one. Over here, what he's pointing out is that you see the distinction. Because we're talking about memalik kalamin, so therefore it lends itself to the distinction between one and the other. V'amedaber yeseh. Just like, so again, this is a mashal. So just like you have in this world, the distinction, because we're talking about memalik kalamin, so it's that type of chayis, which is lending itself to each particular nivra, and therefore you have the difference between one nivra, one creation, and another. So the same is true. You can take that leap and understand that the same thing is in ruchnis. Even though ruchnis you can't observe, and in ruchnis we don't see it, but in the same way in ruchnis, in the spiritual realms, you have different levels of nivraim, different levels of creations, and also, and one is different than the other, because we're talking about the chayis. Now, this is the general overarching idea that we're talking about malik kolam, and in each nivra, each creation has the chayis uniquely tailored to that particular nivra. Whether we're talking about the general idea of tzemeach chay medaber, which is a general category, or we're talking about each nivra individually. But the chayis, this is a chayis which is tailored and specific to that nivra. There's different, many divisions. And all of them, the tzad hashava, is nimshach chayis meshuna v'nivda mechayis and nimshach uzulase. Each one has a unique chayis. V'hainu, where is that from? Midas malchusa yisbarach. So this is all under the overarching system kaviyachal of memalik kalamin. Shu anikar memalik kalamin shemislabish b'toich ha'olam es mamish. That the whole idea of memalik. So when we talk about mamala, we could either focus on the or we can focus on the keli, the focus on the nivra. Both. The is a mitzumtzum, the is a contracted which is the whole idea of dibur. That's when we start. That's the where it's coming from, is the dibur or malchus. And then each nivra, because of that, each nivra now is different, one from the other. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's all memalik kalamin. Oh, but b'chinas seviv kalamin. So seviv kalamin is that the which is all encompassing, and there you don't have any distinction between one and the other. B'chinas hashpa v'ares alikus she'ein nimshuf v'nislabish b'terech ha'elam is b'chinas gilui li'is musig b'asagasam elahu b'chinas makif aleim l'mayla. The mashal that is given, the difference between memali and seviv, one of the mishalim, there's many mishalim, but the difference between seichel and ratzon. Seichel, intellect, there you have, it's mislabish in the person, it's mislabish in the moyach, in the brain, that's the keli, where it resides, as opposed to the idea of ratzon. Ratzon doesn't reside in any specific aver. Ratzon is all encompassing, and that's why it says when a person wants to move a particular part of his body, so it's immediate. He moves it because the ratzon, even though doesn't reside there, meaning it's not mislabish in that particular aver, but it overall encompasses the whole body, and therefore it affects each parts of the body equally. So that's the difference, in short, between Sev and Mamale. Mitzvahs are connected with Sev Kalaman. Torah is mazin. Torah is sustenance of the neshama. That's Mamale. That's how we describe it. There's Sev and Mamale. So the question is, what's more important? Now that we have these terms, so that question, that's the machlek, is what's more important, Seviv or Mamale? Meaning to say, what's in the context of Torah and mitzvahs, what's more important, Torah or mitzvahs? And
Torah and mitzvahs.
Torah or mitzvahs. They're both are necessary, but what's more important? And this and then Nimnu v'Gamru, that what was the conclusion? That Torah is greater. Why? Because in order to bring out the Maila of mitzvahs, you need Torah. Torah shemevi l'dei ma'isa. So in order to bring out, because if it's Seviv is all-encompassing, and therefore it's not realized, it's not recognized. Even though there's a Maila, that's what the opinion that says that Maisa Gadol. But in order to bring out the Maila of Maisa, that's what Torah does. That's Torah shemevi l'dei ma'isa.
Let's go.